It's after midnight, and you found the only dry spot on the block. A deep stone alcove at the side of a church. Out of the wind, off the sidewalk. The kind of doorway that has sheltered people for 100 years. You set your bag down, you lean back against the cold stone, and for the first time all day, you feel something close to safe. Then, from 30 feet above your head, the water starts. Not a leak, not the rain. A steady stream, pouring straight down onto the exact spot where you're lying, soaking your bag, your clothes, everything you own. It runs for about 75 seconds, then it stops. And you already know, because it happened an hour ago, that in another 30 to 60 minutes, it's going to happen again, all night, until you leave. This isn't a horror movie. This is St. Mary's Cathedral in San Francisco, and that water system was real. And what should genuinely unsettle you is what it was a piece of, because over the last 15 years, San Francisco has quietly built itself into the most hostile city on Earth, and it did it in a way you were never supposed to notice. Tonight, we're going to walk through exactly how, and then compare it to the worst cities in the world, so you can see why San Francisco wins. And by the end, you're going to look at your own city very differently, because this was never just about the homeless. Let's start with that cathedral, because it tells you everything about how this works. St. Mary's is the principal church of the Archdiocese of San Francisco. Gorgeous building. 4 tall side doors, each one set into a deep, sheltered alcove. And for people sleeping rough in the city, those alcoves were some of the safest spots around. They were covered, hidden from the wind, a little bit of dignity in a doorway. So around 2013, the cathedral installed a system. Up in the ceiling of each alcove, about 30 feet overhead, water would pour down at set intervals, roughly 75 seconds at a time, every 30 to 60 minutes, all through the night. It ran in all 4 doorways at once. There were no warning signs about the water. There was, however, a sign that said no trespassing. People adapted the only way they could. They started sleeping with umbrellas open, wrapping their belongings in plastic. Picture that, human beings sleeping under umbrellas in a church doorway, because the church was raining on them on a timer. For nearly 2 years, almost nobody knew. Then, in March of 2015, a reporter named Doug Sovern at KCBS Radio broke the story, and the reaction was instant. The Archdiocese's own spokesman admitted he didn't even know the system existed until the reporter showed him video of it running. The head of the city's Coalition on Homelessness called it, and I'm quoting here, "very shocking and very inhumane." And it gets worse. This was happening during one of the worst droughts in California's recorded history. A state literally rationing water was letting a cathedral pour it onto sleeping people to drive them off. Within a day, the Archdiocese apologized. They called the system ill-conceived. They pulled a permit and tore it out. Good. Story over, right? But one line from their apology should stick with you. When they explained themselves, they said the system was modeled on similar setups commonly used in the financial district. Now, that's the church's own defense, so take it with a grain of salt. But sit with what kind of excuse that even is. Their justification for raining on sleeping people was, essentially, everyone downtown already does this. When "we just copied what's normal around here" is the best defense you've got, the problem was never one church. So the real question was never why one church did this. It's what kind of city makes dousing sleeping people with water a normal thing to reach for? To answer that, you have to go back 5 years earlier, to the day San Francisco voted to make resting itself a crime, November 2010. There's a measure on the San Francisco ballot called Proposition L. Its official, focus group name is the promotion of civil sidewalks. That name is doing a lot of quiet work, so let me tell you what it actually did. Proposition L made it illegal to sit or lie down on any public sidewalk in San Francisco, anywhere in the city, between 7 in the morning and 11 at night. And I want you to feel how wide that net is, because it isn't just about someone sleeping rough. Picture yourself on a San Francisco sidewalk on a Tuesday afternoon. You're waiting for a friend. Your legs are tired, so you sit down on the pavement for 10 minutes and check your phone. Under Proposition L, an officer can now legally tell you to get up. Do it again, and that's a warning. Then a fine of $50 to $100. And if it keeps happening, jail time. For sitting down, in the daytime, bothering no one. The tell is who the law doesn't touch. Sit at a cafe table on that same sidewalk, coffee in hand, and you're a customer. Sit 6 feet away on the concrete with no receipt, and you're a criminal. Same sidewalk, same act of sitting. The only thing that changed is whether you were spending money. That's the entire philosophy of a hostile city in one sentence. Public space is only for you if you're generating revenue. Now the political part, which rarely gets mentioned. This idea was pushed by the mayor at the time, Gavin Newsom, and the city's own board of supervisors actually looked at it and voted it down 8-3. The elected representatives said no, so the mayor went around them and put it straight on the ballot, where a well-funded campaign could sell it directly to nervous voters. And it was well-funded. The side supporting the ban, backed by business groups and the Chamber of Commerce, spent somewhere around $500,000. The grassroots group fighting it, called Sidewalks Are for People, raised about $10,000, 50-1. It passed, roughly 54% to 46. Enforcement began in March of 2011. So did it work? Depends what you think work means. Citations under the law peaked at just over 1,000 in a single year, then dropped year after year because the people it targeted simply moved. They didn't get housed, and they didn't disappear. They got pushed to the next block, and the next, in a slow, endless shuffle around the city. Reports on the hate, the very neighborhood the law was built for, found the effect on actual conditions was close to negligible. So all the law really did was move the problem around the map, block by block. But it also did something more permanent. It put a principle in writing, that in San Francisco, resting your body on public ground can make you a criminal. And once a city decides that, everything that comes next starts to feel like common sense, including what a group of ordinary neighbors did 9 years later, with $2,000 and a pile of rocks. September 2019. Imagine walking out your front door one morning and finding 24 boulders sitting on your sidewalk. No notice, no explanation, they're just there. That's what residents woke up to on a quiet little street in the Mission District called Clinton Park, a 2-block alley running near Dubose between Dolores and Valencia. Big, heavy, landscaping-style rocks lined up along the public sidewalk, spaced just close enough together that there's nowhere flat left to lie down. There was no sign and no explanation. They just appeared overnight. At first, even the city was stumped. A local official said, and I love this quote, "We don't know who put them in, but it wasn't the city." For about a month, 24 boulders sat there as a genuine mystery. Then the neighbors admitted it. They'd done it themselves. A group of residents had pooled their own money, around $2,000, and paid to have the boulders installed to keep homeless people, and, they said, drug dealers, from settling on the block. And this is where the story turns very San Francisco. The response was not quiet. Somebody, and to this day nobody's fully claimed it, went out one night and physically shoved 6 of these boulders off the sidewalk and into the street, as a protest. The city came and moved them back onto the sidewalk. So they got pushed into the street again, back and forth. A slow-motion tug-of-war fought with rocks that each weigh a few hundred pounds. Then it got even better. An artist listed the boulders on the free section of Craigslist. Just come and take them. Free anti-homeless rocks, one owner, gently used. The whole thing turned into a national story. A perfect little snapshot of a city at war with itself over the right to sit down. Eventually, with the cameras rolling and the embarrassment mounting, the boulders came out. The neighbors won a block and lost the argument in front of the entire country. But step back from the comedy for a second, because there's something serious underneath it. And if you're sitting there certain you'd never do this, that you would never be the kind of person who pays money to put rocks where a human being sleeps, that's exactly the point. Neither would they. These weren't city planners or developers. They were regular homeowners, and faced with human suffering on their own street, their first instinct was to spend their own cash, making the ground itself uninhabitable. That instinct didn't come from nowhere. The city had spent the previous decade teaching it, first the water, then the law. And by 2019, ordinary people had absorbed the lessons so completely that they'd become the architects themselves. Which brings us to the strangest chapter in all of this. Because at the exact same time the city was letting people design each other out of existence, it was also about to spend $1.7 million on a single toilet. Imagine your neighborhood asks the city for one public toilet, a single, ordinary, single-stall public bathroom for the local square. About 150 square feet, smaller than a lot of bedrooms. A reasonable thing to want. Now imagine the answer comes back. The estimated cost is $1.7 million, and the estimated build time is 2 years. That's what happened to the neighborhood of No Valley. Read those numbers again. $1.7 million and 2 years of construction for a single public toilet. The story went viral instantly, and not just locally. It became international mockery, the punchline that summed up everything people believed about how San Francisco was run. It got so bad that the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, the same name from the sidewalk law a decade earlier, personally stepped in and froze the state funding for it. His office put out a statement saying, plainly, that a single small bathroom should not cost $1.7 million. When the governor has to publicly pause the money for your toilet, something has gone deeply wrong. And then the punchline to the punchline. Once the pressure was on, Once companies started donating materials and labor to make the embarrassment go away, the toilet got built for around $300,000, roughly a fifth of the original number. It finally opened in 2024, and the neighborhood threw a party where a jazz band renamed itself, for one day only, American Standard. Now you might be thinking, okay, that's a funny story about government waste, but what does an expensive toilet have to do with hostile architecture? Everything. And this is the part that actually matters. Think about what that number represents. A city that will tie itself in knots, burn years, and nearly spend $1.7 million on the process, the permits, the labor agreements, the bureaucracy, before it can give you one place to sit and relieve yourself in public. Now look at how fast and how cheaply this same city makes public space hostile. A pile of boulders is $2,000 in a weekend. Slanted benches and armrests are a hardware order. Making a place unlivable is quick and cheap. Making a place livable is slow and nearly impossible. That gap between how easy it is to exclude and how hard it is to provide, that is the machine. That is how a city becomes hostile without anyone ever standing up and voting to be cruel. You don't need a villain. You just need a system where the humane option costs a fortune and takes forever, and the cruel option is on sale at the hardware store. Given those two prices, guess which one a city buys, over and over, for 15 years. Now, at this point you've probably got a fair objection. San Francisco can't really be the most hostile city on Earth. Plenty of cities do this. And you'd be right that they do. So let's actually compare, because this is where San Francisco pulls ahead. Take London. In 2014, a luxury apartment block in Southwark installed rows of metal studs, about 1.5 inches high, in a doorway, right after a homeless person had been sleeping there. Around the same time, a Tesco store on Regent Street laid down its own bed of spikes, and the public reaction was ferocious. A petition gathered well over 100,000 signatures. The mayor of London at the time, Boris Johnson, publicly called the spikes ugly, self-defeating, and stupid. Then, a group of activists showed up in the middle of the night and poured wet concrete straight over the Tesco spikes. Within about 24 hours, Tesco tore them out. Or take the Camden Bench, also in London, a lump of concrete so precisely engineered to stop sleeping, skating, and even comfortable sitting that it's become the textbook example of hostile design worldwide. Tokyo has its sloped and segmented benches. Cities across China have studded the ground under bridges. Hostile design really is everywhere. So why does San Francisco earn the crown? Because in every one of those other cases, the hostility is a single object, a row of spikes, one notorious bench, and when the public finds it and gets angry enough, it comes out. London spikes were gone in a day. In San Francisco, it doesn't come out. It becomes the city. The water was a method borrowed from downtown. The exclusion was written into law by public vote. The boulders were paid for by the neighbors themselves. Every layer treated as normal. Every layer left in place. San Francisco earns the crown because it did something worse than build the worst single object. It made hostility the default setting for an entire city. In other places, the spikes are the exception that sparks an outcry. In San Francisco, the outcry is the exception, and the hostility is just Tuesday. So let's put it all together, because on their own, each of these is just a weird San Francisco story. Stacked up, they're a blueprint. The water taught people it was acceptable to make a place physically painful to occupy. The law taught people that resting in public could be a crime. The boulders proved ordinary citizens had learned to build the exclusion themselves. And the toilet exposed the engine under all of it. A city where the cruel option is always the affordable one. And now I have to be honest with you about the trick this whole video has been building toward. Every example so far has been about homelessness. That's how these things always get sold to you. It's always framed as being about them. The people in the doorways, the people on the sidewalk, somebody else. But look closer at what actually got built, and look at who it touches. That bench you can't lie down on? You can't nap on it either. After a double shift, waiting for a bus that's 40 minutes late. Those armrests bolted into the middle of every seat? They're there whether you're homeless or 8 months pregnant or 70 years old with a bad hip. The vanished public toilets, the leaning rails where benches used to be, the quiet removal of anywhere to simply exist without buying something. None of that checks your bank balance before it affects you. The hostile city doesn't actually tell the difference between the homeless person and you. It just started with the person nobody would defend, because that's how you get the public to accept it. Nobody fights for the guy in the doorway. So the doorway is where they test it. And once the water and the law and the boulders and the missing benches all become normal, they don't get taken back out when you show up. They're just the city now. The city you also have to live in. That's the quiet part. San Francisco didn't become the most hostile city on Earth by targeting a small group of people. It became hostile by building a place that treats stillness, rest, and simply existing without spending money as problems to be engineered away. And it turns out, once you build a city like that, everyone has to live in it, including you. So do something for me after this video. Walk around your own city, wherever you are, and just look. Look at the benches, look at the ledges, look at the doorways and the planters, and the strange metal studs on every flat surface. You're going to start seeing it everywhere, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Because none of this is unique to San Francisco. San Francisco is just the clearest case, the place where the whole philosophy got tested out in the open. The same design is coming to your city, if it isn't there already. Remember that Camden bench I mentioned? I broke down the entire story of how one lump of concrete became the most copied piece of anti-human furniture on Earth. That video is on screen right now. Go watch it, and subscribe, because we're going through this one hostile city at a time, until you can read the language your whole world is written in.